For as long as Princess Lysara could remember, stories about humans had been nothing more than bedtime myths told across the stars. Every child on Velastra grew up hearing about them, creatures of fire and fury who had once ruled half the galaxy, then vanished without a trace. Some called them monsters, others called them saviors. But to Lysara they were only legends, nothing more. Her teachers said humanity was wiped out ages ago during the Great Collapse. Their worlds burned, their fleets disappeared, their names slowly faded from history. Velastron archives contained only fragments, an old photograph, a broken transmitter, and the symbol of a blue planet, Earth. To Lysara, it was a fascinating mystery. She sometimes stared at the stars and imagined what humans must have been like. Brave, reckless, and proud, that's how the stories described them. But the galaxy had changed. Empires rose and fell. Now Velastra ruled many systems, and humans were remembered only as ancient ghosts. Until that day, Lysara's royal cruiser, the Seraphine, glided through the black void near the rim of a forgotten star system. Her mission was diplomatic, traveling to the frontier world of Carthion to discuss a peace treaty. The route was supposed to be safe, but the stars had other plans. Without warning, alarms screamed. "Your Highness!" shouted Commander Telnar, her bodyguard. Multiple warp signatures. "Unknown ships approaching fast." The holographic display lit up with red marks, dozens of them. "Pirates, raiders, the worst kind, shields up," she ordered. "Send a distress beacon." "We're being jammed," Telnar yelled. Within minutes, the royal cruiser was surrounded. Enemy fighters tore through her escorts. Explosions rocked the hull. The Seraphine's silver armor cracked like glass. Lysara tried to maintain calm, but her heart raced. The raiders were after her. Everyone knew the bounty on a Velastran princess could buy an entire planet. "Evacuate the crew," she commanded. "Get to the escape pods." Telnar shook his head. "You're the target, princess. You have to go first. I will not abandon my people." Before he could reply, the ship shook again. A massive blast tore through the starboard side. Fire and smoke filled the hallways. The princess stumbled, coughing as sparks rained down. The lights flickered, then died. Through the chaos, she grabbed her energy pistol and ran toward the engine bay. The escape pods were destroyed. There was no way out. Behind her, she heard screams, the echo of blaster fire and the metallic clang of boarding hooks. The raiders were inside. Lysara hid behind a broken console as footsteps echoed through the smoke. She could see their shadows, tall armored men with glowing red visors. Their leader's voice boomed through the hall. "Find the princess. Bring her alive. The Vork Dominion pays double for royal blood." She held her breath. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed sharp. She waited until one of them walked close, then fired. A clean shot. The raider fell, sparks flying from his armor. The others turned and fired back. The console exploded beside her. Lysara ducked, feeling the heat graze her cheek. There were too many of them. She couldn't win. She ran deeper into the ship, past flickering corridors and fallen crew. Her lungs burned. The air was thick with smoke. Every step echoed like thunder in the silence of space. Finally, she reached the engine chamber, the heart of the Seraphine. The great plasma core pulsed dimly, damaged but still alive. She hid behind the coolant tanks, her pulse pounding in her ears. The sound of footsteps returned. The raiders were following her trail. Her pistol's power cell was nearly empty. She had maybe one shot left. She pressed her back to the metal wall, whispering a prayer to the Star Mother. Then the noise stopped. The door slid open with a hiss and a figure entered, slow, calm, deliberate. But something was different. This one didn't move like a raider. He walked with silent confidence, each step measured. His armor was battered and old, covered in strange markings she didn't recognize. His helmet was cracked on one side, revealing part of a face, rough skin, dark eyes, human-like features. He carried a weapon unlike any she'd seen, heavy, ancient, with the word Terra Command faintly engraved on its side. The man looked around the room, scanning the shadows. His voice came through a broken comm speaker, deep and steady. "You can come out now, princess. You're safe." She froze. Her heart skipped. How did he know who she was? Lysara slowly stepped out, her pistol trembling in her hand. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Show your face." He tilted his head slightly, then reached up and unlocked his helmet. With a soft click, it came off, and for the first time in her life, Lysara saw a human. His hair was dark and messy, his face scarred from old battles, his expression calm, but weary. His eyes, sharp, intelligent, and tired, met hers without fear. "Name's Daniel Hale," he said simply. "Lieutenant Earth Defense Force, or what's left of it." The pistol in her hand lowered by instinct. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Humans." "You're extinct," he gave a short, dry laugh. "Yeah, we get that a lot." Before she could say another word, the deck shook violently. The raiders had found them again. A dozen of them burst through the side door, weapons blazing. "Down!" Daniel shouted. He moved faster than she thought possible. In one smooth motion, he dove behind a console and opened fire. His old rifle roared with power, spitting blue plasma rounds that tore through enemy armor. He aimed with precision, each shot clean, efficient. The princess watched in disbelief as the human fought. There was no panic in his movements, only focus, instinct, and something deeper: purpose. When his rifle overheated, he switched to a short blade strapped to his leg, a combat knife sharp and ancient. He charged, closing the distance before the raiders could reload. Within seconds, the chamber was silent again. The last raider fell with a metallic thud. Smoke curled around them. Daniel stood breathing heavily. He wiped blood from his cheek and looked at her. "You all right?" Lysara nodded slowly, still stunned. You fought like the stories said you would." He gave a faint smile. "Stories usually leave out how much it hurts." She looked around. The engine room was a mess, sparks flying, walls cracked. The ship was barely holding together. Daniel holstered his weapon and checked a small wrist device. "You've got less than an hour before this reactor goes critical. We need to move. Where will we go?" she asked. "There's an old outpost nearby," he said. "Used to be human. Might still have a working shuttle." Lysara hesitated, watching him. "Why help me? You don't even know who I am." He looked up at her, expression unreadable. "Because you're alive. That's reason enough." For a long moment she said nothing. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, not even her own guards. Finally she nodded. "Then lead the way, Lieutenant." They moved through the wreckage together, two beings from two worlds that should never have met. The ship's corridors were dark and silent, filled with drifting smoke and sparks. Occasionally Daniel stopped to check corners, his rifle raised. He was cautious, disciplined. Lysara followed close behind, still trying to understand what she was seeing. A human, real, breathing, standing right in front of her. "How long have you been here?" she asked quietly. "Too long," he replied. "Been hiding out on the edge since Earth fell." "So the stories were true," she whispered. "Your people fought the galactic wars?" "Yeah, fought, bled, built, lost. Then we disappeared." His voice grew soft. "But I guess we left something behind." They reached the airlock. Daniel pressed a few buttons and the outer door hissed open. Beyond it, she saw the cold light of the stars and in the distance a small metallic structure on a nearby moon. "That's our ride," he said. "Stay close." As they stepped into the void, magnetic boots locking onto the hull, Lysara felt the first chill of space against her skin. The stars stretched forever. For the first time, she didn't feel like a princess of an empire. She felt small, just another life among countless others. And walking beside her was a living piece of history, a soldier from a world that refused to die. Inside the moon outpost, Daniel powered up the lights. The place was old and dusty, filled with human writing and symbols Lysara couldn't read. "What is this place?" she asked. He looked around slowly. "A listening post. We used it to monitor enemy fleets during the old war. I used to serve here." She touched the metal walls gently. "You really came from Earth?" "Yeah," he said. "Once. Long time ago." There was silence between them, heavy, filled with questions neither dared to ask. Finally, she said softly, "I thought humans were gone. But maybe you just went quiet." Daniel smiled faintly. "We don't vanish, Princess. We just wait for the right time to come back." Outside, the stars shimmered over the broken cruiser. Lysara stood by the window, staring at the endless dark. For the first time in her life, the legend had a face. And humanity, long thought extinct, had a heartbeat again. The old human outpost was silent except for the hum of weak generators. Dust floated through the air like snow. The lights flickered every few seconds, throwing long shadows across the metal walls. Princess Lysara walked slowly, her eyes scanning strange symbols and faded flags on the walls. She could not read the human letters, but she could feel the weight of history in them. The place smelled of iron and age. Daniel Hale moved with quiet confidence. His armor was scratched, his left shoulder plate cracked, but he still carried himself like a soldier who had never stopped fighting. He checked each corridor carefully before motioning for her to follow. "Is anyone here?" she asked in a soft voice. "No," Daniel said. "This station's been empty for years. I kept it running in case I needed it again." He opened a control panel, typed a few commands, and old screens flickered to life. Holograms appeared. Maps of nearby systems, old human battle plans, and encrypted transmissions that had not been touched for decades. Lysara stood beside him, amazed. "You mean this place was built by your people?" He nodded. "During the last war. It was a listening post. We used it to track the Vork Dominion." Her eyes widened. "The same Dominion that attacked my ship?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "They've been around for a long time. We fought them once, long ago. Guess they never learned." He scrolled through data on the screen, his gloved fingers moving fast. "Your attackers weren't just pirates. They were Dominion scouts. That means they found something they want, and they'll come back in greater numbers." Lysara frowned. "Something they want from me?" Daniel looked at her for a moment, then turned back to the console. "Maybe, or maybe from your empire. You said you were on a peace mission, right?" "Yes," she said. "To the planet Carthion. We were negotiating trade routes." "Trade routes," he muttered. "That explains it. What do you mean?" "The Dominion doesn't like peace," Daniel said. "They thrive on chaos. If your treaty goes through, it'll unite 3 major sectors under one banner. That means fewer raids, fewer wars, and they lose control. So they'll do anything to stop you." Lysara crossed her arms. "And what do you suggest we do?" "My ship is gone. My escort is dead. My communications are jammed." Daniel leaned against the console, his expression calm but tired. "We fight smart. We rebuild your link, send a message, and make sure they never try again." She studied him, curiosity in her eyes. "You speak as if this isn't the first time you've done this." He gave a small laugh. "It isn't. I used to do this for a living." Hours passed as they worked. Daniel repaired power lines while Lysara reconnected the long-range antenna. Despite their differences, they worked well together. She noticed that he never complained, never hesitated. Every motion he made was efficient. At one point she asked, "Were all humans like you?" Daniel paused, looking out through a cracked viewport at the distant stars. No, most were better. There was something heavy in his voice. She decided not to press further. When they finally powered up the antenna, Daniel tapped a sequence on his wrist device. The display showed faint static, then a weak transmission. "Velastra Command, this is Princess Lysara aboard Human Station." She started, but Daniel stopped her. "Wait, don't use your full title. If the Dominion is still listening, they'll trace it." She nodded. "Then what should I say?" He smiled slightly. "Say you're alive, but not where. Let them find your coordinates through a coded signal instead." She followed his advice. The message went out, a faint beacon of hope drifting across the cold dark. Then silence. A few hours later, Daniel stood alone in the storage bay, repairing his rifle. The weapon was old, patched together from several models. Lysara approached quietly. "You've done this before," she said. He didn't look up. "Too many times. Why stay here alone when your people are gone?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Because someone has to remember us. Humanity wasn't perfect, Princess. We made mistakes. We fought too many wars. But we stood for something. We didn't run from danger. We protected those who couldn't fight." Lysara watched him carefully. "You still believe in that?" He looked at her with steady eyes. Every day, something inside her shifted. She had always seen humans as wild and dangerous creatures from legend. But this one was different. There was discipline, compassion, and pain in his eyes. She opened her mouth to say something, but an alarm cut through the air. The radar lit up with red. Daniel turned instantly. "They're back!" Lysara rushed to the console. "How many?" "Too many," he said. 2 destroyers, 1 carrier, and a swarm of fighters." Her heart sank. "We can't fight that." Daniel smiled faintly. "You can't, I can." She stared at him, shocked. "You can't possibly." He was already moving, checking his armor and reloading his rifle. "There's an old orbital platform above this moon. If I can reach it, I might be able to activate its defense grid." Lysara followed him. "That's suicide." He stopped and looked at her. "I've done worse. Within minutes, they were in an old human shuttle. The engines coughed and spat, but Daniel coaxed them to life. The small craft lifted off from the moon's surface, heading toward the broken platform floating above. The platform was massive, a ring of metal and debris orbiting silently in the black sky. Once it had been a human mining and defense station. Now it was a ruin. Daniel guided the shuttle into a docking bay and stepped out first. The corridors were dark, filled with echoes of the past. "Stay close," he said. They moved through the halls, past old posters with human writing. "Terra endures." Lysara brushed dust off one of them. "Your people had pride," she said softly. "Still do," he replied. They reached the control core. Daniel opened a panel and began connecting his wrist device. The holographic display came alive, showing multiple defense turrets and old laser cannons all offline. He cracked his knuckles. "Let's see if we can wake the old girl up." Lysara watched him work. His hands moved quickly, steady and confident. "You really believe this will work?" "It has to," he said. "If it doesn't, they'll find us both." Moments later, power surged through the station. Lights flickered on. Outside, ancient turrets rotated, locking onto incoming ships. Daniel grinned. "She still remembers me." The Dominion fleet entered orbit, black ships covered in glowing red veins. Their leader broadcast a message. "Velastran vessel, surrender the princess or die." Lysara looked at Daniel. "What do we do?" He replied calmly. "We remind them what humans were capable of." He pressed the command. The platform roared to life. Blue beams of light fired from its cannons, striking the first enemy destroyer. The blast tore through its hull, turning it into a fireball. Lysara gasped. "Incredible." Daniel worked quickly, rerouting power to shields and targeting the next ship. The Dominion responded with missiles. Explosions shook the platform. "Sparks flew, hold on," he shouted. The platform trembled under impact, but the human technology held strong. Daniel's voice stayed calm, giving orders as if leading an invisible crew. "Turrets 3 through 6, focus on the carrier. Fire at will." Another blast hit, lighting up space with blue fire. The carrier exploded, scattering debris across the void. Lysara could hardly believe what she was seeing. "You're fighting an entire fleet with a relic," he smiled. Human engineering never dies easy. But then alarms blared again. "Warning, power core overheating." Lysara's heart raced. "It's going to blow." Daniel scanned the data. "We've got one last shot before it does." He targeted the last destroyer and fired everything the station had left. The recoil shook the platform violently. The final enemy ship shattered in a flash of light. Then the power core went dark. Silence. Only the sound of heavy breathing filled the room. Lysara looked out the window. The enemy fleet was gone, nothing but smoke and drifting wreckage. She turned to Daniel. "You did it," he smiled weakly. "We did it." Then he collapsed. She rushed to his side, catching him before he hit the floor. His armor was cracked open, wires sparking. "Daniel, stay with me." He opened one eye and gave a faint smile. "Guess I pushed it too far." "You saved us," she said. "You saved my people." He shook his head slowly. "No, princess. I saved a story that was worth saving." Lysara felt a lump in her throat. "You can't die. Not after this." "I'm not dying," he whispered, "just taking a long rest." She helped him to his feet, supporting his weight. "Come, we'll get you home." As they limped back to the shuttle, the stars outside shimmered like witnesses to something reborn, a legend returning to life. Lysara looked back at the ruined platform glowing faintly in the dark. "Maybe," she whispered, "the humans never disappeared. Maybe they just waited for someone to believe again." Daniel chuckled softly. "That's the idea." The shuttle drifted slowly through space, carrying Princess Lysara and the human warrior Daniel Hale back to Velastra. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past, cold and silent. The battle on the orbital platform was over, but the memory of explosions and fire still lingered in Lysara's mind. Daniel leaned against the wall, breathing shallowly, sweat dripping down his face. His armor was cracked, and his shoulder plates were bent from the impact of the final shot. Yet despite the exhaustion, he still held himself like a soldier who had endured centuries of war. Lysara knelt beside him, examining the injuries. "You pushed yourself too far," she said softly. "You could have died." He shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "I didn't, and I won't, not yet." She looked at him with a mix of awe and concern. All your life. Fighting alone. Surviving when everyone else is gone? Why? He stared out the viewport at the stars as if seeing something far away. Because someone has to protect what matters. Someone has to make sure the stories don't end.
That's why humans endure, Princess.
We fight not for glory, but to protect life, any life. Lysara nodded slowly. For the first time, she understood the depth of the legends she had grown up believing were only myths. This human was not just a soldier. He was a living piece of history, a legend walking among the stars. When the shuttle finally approached Velastra, the planetary defense system detected it immediately. Alerts blared in the command centers as Lysara transmitted a coded signal to the royal fleet. The planet's surface glowed with preparations for the princess's return. Ships lined the orbital docks and the citizens of Velastra looked to the sky, waiting for news of their ruler. Lysara and Daniel exited the shuttle and stepped onto the main platform. The sight was breathtaking. Hundreds of Velastran soldiers stood in formation, their armor gleaming under the twin suns, awaiting orders. Behind them, the city of Lysara's ancestors stretched across the plains, a monument to centuries of leadership and history. Princess Lysara straightened her posture and called to the crowd. Today, we celebrate not only our survival, but the courage of one who has returned from legend. All eyes turned to Daniel. The human stood tall, his armor battered but his presence commanding. He had fought alone against an overwhelming enemy, protected the princess, and saved the planet from destruction. Whispers spread through the crowd. A human. Alive. Could the legends be true? They say humans are extinct. Lysara stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. He is real. He is living proof that the human warriors we once thought were only stories still exist. Daniel remained silent, letting the words sink in. He did not seek praise, nor did he want recognition. Yet the respect in the eyes of the Velastran people was undeniable. In the palace, Lysara led Daniel to the throne room. The walls were decorated with tapestries depicting centuries of Velastran history, victories, treaties, and the faces of rulers long gone. But now a new chapter was about to be written. Sit, Lysara commanded, motioning to a seat near her throne. Rest, you have earned it. He shook his head. There's still work to be done. Not now, she insisted. First you recover, then we can discuss the future. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. It had been years since anyone had told him to rest. The weight of centuries of battles and solitude seemed to ease slightly. For the first time, he felt part of something larger than himself. As he lay on a padded cot, Lysara sat beside him. Tell me everything, she said. About your people, your battles, your history. I want to understand what makes humans, humans. He sighed, closing his eyes for a moment. Humans were strong, sometimes too strong. We built empires, explored worlds, and fought wars we should not have fought. But we also believed in protecting those who could not protect themselves. That's what we lived for. That's why I am here. To remind the galaxy that even when humans seem gone, our spirit survives. Lysara listened intently. The stories she had grown up with suddenly had faces, emotions, and experiences. She realized how much her people had forgotten, and how much they could learn from him. You've changed everything, she said softly. Not just by saving me, but by showing Velastra what courage truly means. Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe it's time humans return to the story. Maybe it's time to remind the galaxy that we are not gone, only waiting for the right moment to act. Days passed and Daniel recovered. He trained with Velastran soldiers, sharing tactics, strategies, and lessons from a bygone era. Under his guidance, the Velastran forces grew sharper, more coordinated, and prepared for any threat that might emerge from the void. Lysara watched him closely. His presence inspired her people, and she could see the respect in their eyes. But more than that, she could feel a connection forming between her and the human who had changed her understanding of bravery. One evening, as the twin sun set over the city, Lysara approached Daniel in the palace gardens. The flowers glowed faintly under the soft light, casting long shadows across the marble paths. Do you ever get tired of fighting? She asked. Daniel looked out at the horizon, then back at her. Sometimes, he admitted, but I never stop because there's always someone who needs protection. That's what gives my life meaning. Lysara nodded. Then you've given meaning to mine as well. You've shown me what courage truly looks like. For a moment, silence passed between them. It was not empty. It was full of understanding, respect, and the weight of shared experiences. Soon, Lysara called a grand assembly. The leaders of Velastra and neighboring systems gathered to witness a historic announcement. The halls were filled with dignitaries, soldiers, and citizens alike, all eager to hear what the princess had to say. She stepped forward and addressed the crowd. Today, we honor one who has walked out of legend into reality, one who has reminded us of the strength that exists in courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. He is a human. He is a warrior, and he is now part of Velastra's history. All eyes turned to Daniel. For the first time, he stood in the spotlight, fully visible to the galaxy he had saved. Applause echoed through the halls, a sound unfamiliar but comforting to him. The princess continued, "From this day forward, humans shall no longer be considered extinct. Their stories, their strength, and their spirit will once again guide the galaxy, and Velastra will be their ally, as they have been our protectors in the darkest hours." After the assembly, Lysara approached Daniel privately. "I want the galaxy to know your name, Daniel Hale. I want them to remember that humans still exist, and that they are willing to fight for life, not conquest." He looked at her, a quiet smile on his face. "Then let the stars hear our story, princess. Let them remember that courage cannot be erased." Lysara placed a hand on his shoulder. "We will make sure your legacy endures. Together." In the following weeks, Daniel trained new Velastran recruits, guided missions to secure unstable regions, and restored old communication networks across the sector. Wherever he went, he inspired awe and respect. The galaxy had not seen a human warrior in centuries, and now they remembered what humanity was capable of. Lysara often watched him from her command tower, admiring his dedication and the way he carried himself. He was no longer just a legend. He was real, and he was here to stay. One quiet evening, as stars glimmered above the palace, Lysara and Daniel stood side by side on the balcony. She looked up at the sky, her mind filled with the possibilities of the future. "Do you think your people will return fully someday?" she asked. Daniel gazed at the horizon, thoughtful. "Maybe, but even if they don't, humanity's spirit lives on, in us, in those we inspire, and in the stories we leave behind." Lysara nodded. "Then your people will never truly be gone." He smiled faintly. "No, not as long as someone believes." The twin suns set behind them, casting golden light across the palace. For the first time in centuries, humans were no longer myths. They were part of the living galaxy, standing alongside allies who had once doubted their existence. Princess Lysara looked at Daniel and knew that together, they would face whatever the stars had in store. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the pulse of history shifting, bending toward hope, courage, and the return of humanity's legend. The galaxy had witnessed the impossible. A human had returned, not as a ghost, not as a story, but as a force capable of changing the fate of worlds. And with him, Velastra would rise stronger, wiser, and united like never before. In that moment, the legend of the humans was no longer just a tale. It was reality, and the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, honoring the warrior who had stepped out of myth and into history.